Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this subject in these series of videos that I found to be very particularly interesting. And keep in mind that before I end up doing this video, a lot of people, of course, may come on my channel not necessarily knowing me, and they may expect me to have a certain fighter bias, or they may expect me to have a certain racial bias, or they may expect me overall, once again, to favor certain fighters. And for those of you that have been on my channel long enough, you know overall that I don't usually tend to do that, or, well, in my mind, I don't tend to really do that whatsoever. Once again, I don't like to be a huge fan of any of these fighters. Of course, I like to watch certain fighters, and I admire the skill set and watching certain fighters and certain athletes, of course, and there's certain favorite styles of mine, but I don't really like to be a mega fan of any of these fighters or of anybody because, as I've always stated within my analyzations, that would ruin my objectivity. And that's the point of this whole entire channel, which is to analyze things in somewhat of a correct or logical or objective way. But anyways, of course, for those of you that recently ended up seeing Gervonta Tank Davis versus Frank Martin, which of course was the last big boxing fight. Of course, we also could talk about Liam Paro versus that of Subriel Matias, which in my view was a very interesting fight. I was very glad to see Liam Paro pull out of that fight because I thought that he was the better technical fighter from the get-go. And to be honest with you, for those of you, of course, that ended up seeing my fight prediction, I thought that Liam Paro, to be quite honest with you, that he's probably the most talented Australian fighter that I've seen in the past several years. More than Jeff Horn, more than George Kambosos, more than Tim Tszyu. He can pretty much do everything technically right. It's just that I don't know how much his athleticism is going to be able to carry him because he doesn't come across to me as a, very, very elite athlete, but he still has good speed and decent power, so we'll see where he goes. But we'll see. But anyways, heading into another conversation, of course, the biggest event that, of course, recently happened was that of the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Frank Martin fight, where, of course, as I predicted, Gervonta Tank Davis was victorious, and not only was he victorious, but he was victorious by stoppage, I believe, within that of the 8th round over the very talented and very game Frank Martin. But anyways, the question now is about Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. Where does he really go from here? And on top of that, a lot of people have also been asking, where does Gervonta Tank Davis really deserve to be ranked in terms of the pound-for-pound rankings or in terms of with the best fighters out there? Of course, there's a certain amount of people now debating that he certainly is top 10 pound for pound. There might be certain people that would debate that he's not even top 10 pound for pound. There's some people that, of course, would debate that he's top 5 pound for pound, or maybe even debatably number 1 pound for pound. In my personal view, if you're asking my ranking about Gervonta Tank Davis, I think that he right now is certainly top 10 pound for pound, especially after Teofimo Lopez, in my view, got a robbery decision over Jermaine Ortiz. And I do not use the term robbery quite often, but in my view, that was a very poor decision by the judges to give Teofimo Lopez that fight, when it came down to it. And then, of course, with other certain performers like Devin Haney, even though, of course, the loss was overturned against Ryan Garcia, I do have to remember that ass kicking that Devin Haney took against that of a Ryan Garcia. Now, that being said, of course, Ryan Garcia, he was caught on PEDs. But, of course, for those of you that have watched my channel long enough, you know that I also believe that Devin Haney is also on PEDs. I believe that anyone with the snack program, whether it be Terrence Crawford, Devin Haney, Caleb Plant, Demetrius Bubo Andrade, or whether it be Shakur Stevenson, that snack program, who ends up working with that of Victor Conte, someone who was a former and still one of the top supplier of PEDs, that yes, they are on PEDs. It is what it is. And you can take a look at that once again with their bodily changes. But once again, when it comes down to when you talk about the pound for pound list, many people have talked about Gervonta Tank Davis. Where does he deserve to be right now, especially compared to his contemporaries? And does he potentially deserve to be ranked as the number 1 pound for pound fighter? And my answer would be no. But in terms of a boxing talent, Gervonta Tank Davis definitely is up there with anybody in the world. I don't think that in terms of the accomplishments and in terms of the resume, that he can be up there with certain fighters like that of a Canelo or an Inoue or a Usyk or a Crawford, and maybe even out of an Artibitabev, because that would probably be my top 5 pound per pound right now. But Gervonta Tank Davis definitely is on his way. There's no doubt that in my view that if you know boxing and that if you don't have a certain bias of foot, that Gervonta Tank Davis is an extraordinarily gifted talent. There's no doubt about it. But the question now is that for Gervonta Tank Davis, what is potentially the next big super fight? Well, people have potentially talked about there being a fight between Gervonta Tank Davis and Mr. Naoya Inoue. But in this video, not only did I want to talk about the possibility of this fight, I wanted to talk about who right now has had the better career. Because DontaesBoxingNation and a certain amount of these other guys, of course, they will complain that Gervonta Tank Davis, that he's not getting the respect that he has deserved, and that a lot of people are complaining that he's being ranked in the top 5 or top 3 pound for pound. Well, in my view, even though Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, maybe you could have a debate, maybe at the number 5 pound for pound spot, I don't think that he can be quite debated, at least for certain, within the top 5 pound for pound. And if you're one of these channels from the LDBC or new media that was complaining about Naoya Inoue, or complaining about Vasily Lomachenko, or Gennady Golovkin, or some of these other guys that were being ranked in the top 5 pound per pound way too early because they didn't have the resume. Well, does Gervonta Tank Davis really have the resume to really quite be in the top 5 pound per pound? I mean, the only 2 A-grade fights that he's really ever won has been Ryan Garcia and also that of Frank Martin. 2 guys that have never even been a champion before in their career. Now, both of those guys, in my view, are championship quality. But we're going to first take a look at the first video by DontaesBoxingNation, where he talks about Gervonta Tank Davis and Naoya Inoue. And then we're going to take a look at Blue Blood Sports TV. And Blue Blood Sports TV is going to state a certain truth, or at least to a certain degree, about Gervonta Tank Davis when compared to Naoya Inoue. All right? So it is what it is. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what DontaesBoxingNation has to say.
DontaesBoxingNation, what's going on, guys? So Naoya Inoue believes that he could beat Gervonta Tank Davis. He believes, at least he implied, that Gervonta Tank Davis, he is straight up and down, no special effects. He only has power. Matter of fact, in this interview that he did, he even used a hand signal describing Gervonta as straight up and down. This is what Inoue actually said. He said, quote, "I don't really think Tank has anything in his arsenal that could give me trouble in the ring. The one thing that Tank has is power, which can't be denied." It sounds like Naoya Inoue, he has a lot of confidence that he can beat Gervonta and is planning on fighting Tank someday. First of all,
I have to comment on this, because knowing DontaesBoxingNation and the snake that he is, knowing overall the narratives that he's going to try to pull, of course, we also know that another fight that may potentially happen would be the Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Bud Crawford fight, which of course would be in a very similar situation, because Terrence Bud Crawford would be moving up against a fighter that not only is astronomically skilled, but against a fighter that of course is going to be very great in that of Canelo Alvarez, and of course bigger, when it comes down to it. It would be very similar in my view when Inoue, if he is going to potentially fight that of Gervonta Tank Davis. Now I wonder what the standards will be if Gervonta Tank Davis ends up beating that of Naoya Inoue in the ring by that of knockout, or just by that of unanimous decision, or ends up beating him by whatever way possible. And if Canelo Alvarez ends up beating Terrence Bud Crawford, what the standards will be. Because of course, DontaesBoxingNation is trying to frame as if Canelo Alvarez beats Terrence Bud Crawford, that the only reason why Canelo is going to win that fight is just purely off of the weight. DontaesBoxingNation keeps trying to make Canelo Alvarez seem like he's like some sort of Antonio Margarito or something, and like he only has one way of fighting and just he's just super one-dimensional. That's what DontaesBoxingNation will have you believe. Now, don't get it twisted. Would the weight, of course, be a valid excuse if Terrence Bud Crawford ended up losing that fight? Absolutely. But I'm just wondering, it'd be very interesting to see what the standards would be if Gervonta Tank Davis ends up defeating that of Naoya Inoue, and if Canelo Alvarez ends up defeating that of Terrence Bud Crawford. I promise you that the standards that DontaesBoxingNation is going to have, that they're going to be completely opposite.
You have to give Naoya Inoue a lot of credit, because literally he's not trying to duck anyone. He wants all the smoke.
Then that means that Naoya Inoue should be your number 1 pound per pound fighter. That's what that means, because that's what we heard about Terrence Bud Crawford for years upon years upon years. Apparently Canelo Alvarez could never be the number 1 pound per pound fighter, because apparently he was avoiding this guy and avoiding that guy and avoiding that guy. He could never be the number 1 pound per pound fighter because of that reason. Well, then that means that by osmosis, that Dante, by your opinion, by your same standards, that Terrence Bud Crawford cannot be the number one pound per pound fighter because he has not taken on all smoke. He did not take the Jerome Boots Ennis fight. He did not take that fight. So what that means is that either Naoya Inoue or Alexander Usyk, according to your old standards, that he has to be, one of those two has to be the number one pound per pound fighter and not that overall, once again, of Terrence Bud Crawford. That's what that means. But once again, we're not going to hear those same standards from Dante's Boxing Nation. Once again, the LDBC and new media, they pretty much make up standards as they go along. They love to claim you this bullshit about how honest and objective that they are and that they're here for the whole truth and honesty. That's not what they're here for. Once again, the LDBC and new media mainly, but especially these new media channels, they are a pro-racial and a pro-black cult that, yes, of course, they do a great thing in supporting black fighters, but they will do it in the most biased and non-objective way possible. And the same standards and double standards that they bitch, moan, and complain about certain favorite black fighters of theirs going through, or black fighters in general of going through, they put those exact same double standards on fighters that are not black fighters. Okay?
Truly wants to prove that he's the best. He doesn't just want a whole bunch of biased reporters from America just saying he's the best because they like him. He really wants to be the best. He really wants to prove it in the ring. And I can tell you right now, Inoue is a very special fighter, extremely gifted and talented, and he's not going to be easy to beat for anybody. But
No, he's not. And let me tell you what, like I said, Inoue does deserve a lot of credit. And for Dante's Boxing Nation's point that he mentioned earlier, I agree. Inoue is the one fighter on the planet to where that man is there anytime, anywhere. That man, that man is the fucking Habib Nurmagomedov of boxing, Mr. Send Me Location. You know, that man, that man will fight anyone, anywhere. He doesn't give a shit. You know, well, I mean, of course, you know, he's not fighting outside of Japan. But Naoya Inoue is willing to fight anybody, you know, pretty much as long as it's within his location. Which, once again, I don't really have a problem with. Of course, a lot of these guys are bitchy, moaning, and complaining about, you know, oh, well, Inoue is double stacking and blah, blah, blah. Well, what Inoue is doing in terms of the stacking of his hands, or at least with what he's doing, because these people don't know shit about boxing and they just want to commentate because they're in their feelings and racially motivated. For those of you that did not pay attention, what Inoue does is completely legal, not only in Japan, but pretty much in every part of the U.S. besides that of Nevada. All right, for those of you that did not pay attention. It's legal in Texas. It's legal overall, I believe, in parts of California. It's legal in New York. Okay, there was a similar situation, I believe, that happened overall with that of Felix Tito Trinidad. And many people try to compare it to the Antonio Margarito situation. It was not the same as the Antonio Margarito situation. It's just that he wrapped his hands in a different way. It's similar, I believe, to the Naoya Inoue situation. So people who, of course, are going to claim that Inoue is on PEDs and that Inoue is double stacking, keep in mind that the snack program, which holds many of America's top fighters, and also that of the Eddie Reynoso, you know, gym with that of Canelo Alvarez, Ryan Garcia, Oscar Valdez, and a certain amount of the other ones, that all those fighters are on PEDs. Okay? So spare me this bullshit about how Inoue is on PEDs and how he has this unfair advantage, you know, all this other bullshit, because America is not squeaky clean either. They have just as much dirt running through their goddamn system as any of the other parts of the world either. So people can, you know, mention all this bullshit all they want to. Yes, Devin Haney, Terrence Crawford, Shakur Stevenson, Demetrius Andrade, Oscar Valdez, you know, Canelo Alvarez, Ryan Garcia, all those motherfuckers are on PEDs. Every single one. Now, of course, Canelo is not American. He's from Mexico, but he does fight here. You know, so once again, people keep trying to do this bullshit, you know, overall of, oh, Inoue's on PEDs. Most American fighters are on PEDs, so it really don't matter.
Definitely misreading Gervonta Tank Davis if he thinks he's just nothing but power and has no intelligence, has no boxing ability. Gervonta is one of the...
Well, I'm not sure if Naoya Inoue really stated that. I just think that he stated that the only thing that he believes that Gervonta Tank Davis is going to really trouble him with is going to be that of power, which, of course, you never know. But Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, he's an incredibly talented fighter. And there'd be certain advantages that Inoue would have as a fighter, and there'd be certain advantages that Gervonta Tank Davis has as a fighter. But I just think that Gervonta Tank Davis, that combined with his talent and his size, that he'd just be way too much. Inoue is a dude that, to be quite honest with you, he's already starting to step out of bounds if he goes up to 126. at 122. He's already a little bit smaller than these guys, but it's not noticeable enough to the point to where he's having major problems. But once he gets up to the 126-pound division, I promise you that Inoue is probably going to start having a little bit more problems. And that's going to be his 5th weight class that he will win a belt in if he can win a belt there. So once again, the Gervonta Tank Davis fight, unless I see Inoue just completely rolling over guys like Oscar Valdez and maybe some other guys there, to be honest with you, I would not be too confident in Inoue being super competitive in a Gervonta Tank Davis fight. I just wouldn't.
Most intelligent boxers in the sport of boxing. And I think he's faced more different styles, dangerous different styles, than a lot of the top fighters today.
No, he hasn't. Stop bullshitting. And listen, I like Gervonta Tank Davis, but this is also why a certain amount of people overall are criticizing Gervonta Tank Davis being in the top 3 pound for pound. And a lot of people, of course, I may also release this one video. Like I seen John Boxing pound for pound the best or some other channels bitch and moan and complain about, oh, Gervonta Tank Davis, he can't be in the top pound for pound according to a lot of these guys, because it's a black fighter being in the top 3 pound for pound. And don't get it twisted, I'm sure that a certain amount of them have that racial motivation. But also a big part of the reason why people are not accepting that bullshit is because Gervonta Tank Davis, no offense, but this dude has fought literally pretty much the exact same type of guys really for his past several fights. Straightforward Latino fighters that have certain faults, or Latino fighters that clearly do not have a main chance and should not belong in the ring with Gervonta Tank Davis. The only outlier pretty much was that of Ryan Garcia. No one really thought that Isaac Pitbull Cruz was going to defeat Gervonta Tank Davis when he got in the ring. It ended up being more competitive than what Gervonta Tank Davis thought. It was somewhat of a cherry pick gone wrong. All right, it is what it is, but none of them call it that. Mario Barrios was never going to defeat someone like Gervonta Tank Davis. He's a good fighter. He's not a great fighter. They'll try to praise him as someone overall that was the number 1 or number 2 guy within the 140-pound weight class at the time. He never was. He never won a legitimate belt there, and he wasn't even within the top 5 there. Debatably top 5, but definitely not within the top 4. Not Josh Taylor, not Regis Prograis, not Jose Ramirez, and not some of the other guys there that were there at that moment in time. All right? It is what it is. Then he fought Rolando Romero, someone that has power but can't box worth a damn, has terrible boxing ability. He fought that at Hector Garcia, a dude who's very decent, but a guy that doesn't really have that great of power, at least compared to Gervonta Tank Davis, and a guy that is not an exceptional fighter, but only a good fighter. Spare me the bullshit about how Gervonta Tank Davis has fought all these super dangerous styles. He's fought Ryan Garcia and he's fought Frank Martin. I'll give him credit for that. But the rest of the fighters have been usually straightforward Latino fighters or Latino fighters that are not going to have any chance against him whatsoever. Spare me the bullshit.
Including Naoya Inoue. So we'll see if that fight happens.
And keep in mind that these are the same guys that love to claim that Canelo Alvarez went on the European tour. Well, Gervonta Tank Davis went on the straightforward Latino tour. That's what Gervonta Tank Davis did. All right, so spare me this goddamn bullshit of how Gervonta Tank Davis was just in there with some of the best competitors in the world. No, he wasn't. At the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis now, once again, he has Ryan Garcia and he has Frank Martin on his resume. He deserves a lot of credit for that. Those are 2 A-grade level wins. But at the end of the day, he has not made the Lomachenko fight when he should have. He has not made the Teofimo Lopez fight. He has not made the Shakur Stevenson fight. He has not made the Devin Haney fight. He never made the Josh Taylor fight, nor the Regis Prograis fight, nor the Jose Ramirez fight. He never made any of those fights. So please spare me this bullshit once again about how Gervonta Tank Davis just out here fighting the best of the best. That is not the case. Because if he is trying to fight the best of the best, he would have been trying to fight Devin Haney or Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson several years ago. Or he would have tried to fight Lomachenko several years ago and tried to make some of those other fights. I like Gervonta Tank Davis, but let's not sit here and act like he was Canelo Alvarez fighting Danny Jacobs one fight, then Gennady Golovkin another fight, then Billy Joe Saunders, then Caleb Plant. And once again, people can criticize that quote-unquote European tour all they want to with Canelo Alvarez. But Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders were legitimately A-grade level talents for those weight classes. All right? Rolly Romero, Hector Garcia, and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, at least at that time, were not A-grade level talents. Now, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, maybe he could be if he keeps going the way that he's going. But the only true A-grade level talents that he's really ever fought have been Ryan Garcia and that of Frank Martin. So please, once again, let's stop with the narrative.
In the future, once again, it sounds like Naoya Inoue, he's really confident that he can move up to 135 or even go up to 130 and meet Gervonta at a catch.
Now, that being said, if we're going to compare it to that of Mr. Naoya Inoue, Inoue has not really fought that many A-grade level names either, in my view. I think that for his weight classes, that of course you could debate Stephon Coolboy Fulton, maybe Lewis Neri if you wanted to debate it. I mean, that's up to you. That's a debate in my view. Maybe Nonito Donaire, just because he knocked out a couple of undefeated guys or a couple of champions right before he fought that of Naoya Inoue. And then of course I think, you'd have Emmanuel Rodriguez. Maybe those fighters. But, it's not like he has a bunch of A-grade level names. But one thing I'll give Inoue is this. He was in a fight that a lot of people thought that he was actually going to lose. All right? And that was against Stephon Coolboy Fulton. I don't think Gervonta Tank Davis has ever really been in a fight where a lot of people said, wow, this dude might actually deserve to be the favorite over him, meaning a real 50-50 level fight. Because, of course, Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin were both very talented fighters. But it's not like it was his Canelo versus Golovkin or his Mayweather versus Pacquiao, or his Crawford versus Spence. Gervonta Tank Davis has not had that fight yet. He's had a very big fight with Ryan Garcia, of course, but he has not yet really had a fight where people have said, okay, can Gervonta Tank Davis really actually win this fight? Everyone pretty much knew so far that the fights in Gervonta Tank Davis's career, that he was mainly going to win them. And to be fair, a lot of people, of course, they thought that Inoue was going to mainly win his fights as well, besides that of the Stephon Coolboy Fulton fight. But that fight, in my view, that of course has to put his resume above Davis's.
Wait, and actually beat him. But before a fantasy match like that takes place, I have to tell you guys, Gervonta's next fight, or his possible next fight, may be the most difficult fight of his entire career. In fact, I'm pretty sure it will be. And that's against Vasily Lomachenko. But I'm going to talk a lot more.
Right, even though Vasily Lomachenko is 36 years old, turning 37 next year. The man tries to claim that Crawford and Mayweather at that age are a grandpa. But Vasily Lomachenko, apparently he's at a very good point in his career. All this other bullshit, or that when Canelo fights Golovkin at 36, that he fought a guy out of his prime. Well, is Lomachenko out of his prime? Once again, this is how much of a snake Dante's Boxing Nation is. Like, for people that believe that this dude keeps the same energy, all that bullshit, no, he never does. But, it is what it is.
About that in a separate video. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. Let me tell you.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for Dante's Boxing Nation's input. But I thought that I would also get in Blue Blood Sports TV because I thought that what he was about to say was very particularly interesting. So let's get into it. Okay, so this part, of course, is going to be Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV, who actually, once again, is one of the few new media or LDBC channels that I would probably recommend just in terms of at least level of consistency that he has. Now, of course, does that mean that I agree with the man on everything and that maybe that he will not have certain racial motivations here and there? No, not necessarily, because I think that anyone that once again associates themselves with the LDBC or new media, that more than likely they're going to have a little bit of that, but it is what it is. But Blue Blood Sports TV, I think once again has one of the better boxing channels out there. But anyways, he's going to be talking about this a little bit. Let's get into it. And he's going to state something that I tend to agree with when comparing that to Mr. Naoya Inoue and Gervonta Tank Davis. So let's get straight into it.
108, I believe. Right? So he follows somewhat in the footsteps of Manny Pacquiao. Right? And so he's looking to become and break the records of Manny Pacquiao. Now, obviously, he's done something Manny Pacquiao has never done. He's become undisputed. Not only did he become undisputed, but he became undisputed in 2 separate weight classes, right?
Let me claim this also as well, because there's also a certain amount of debates, especially when you talk about Terence Crawford or Alexander Usyk or Naoya Inoue, where people are now trying to make debates and say, well, you know what, they have to be placed over fighters like Mayweather or Pacquiao or Muhammad Ali or certain fighters like this because those guys never became undisputed. Those guys became undisputed in not only one weight class but 2. And of course, that's a very great, thing to do. But keep in mind that, kind of like when you take a look at the NBA today, and the thing to get today is triple doubles because of the way that the offense is ran and because of the pace that people, of course, love to compare numbers and they love to take a look at it and say, wow, Luka Doncic and LeBron James and Nikola Jokic, they've gotten this amount of triple doubles, and this player wasn't able to do that back in the 80s, so that must mean that they're greater. Well, keep in mind that when you talk about the stats being a little bit inflated because of the way that they play, and on top of that of the pace, is the exact same way in boxing today. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that being undisputed is not a great accomplishment. But we can't just completely let that be the factor, because when you talk about Mayweather and Pacquiao's time, of course, it was great to become undisputed, but that was not really the main mark of greatness. All right. So, once again, being undisputed, of course, is a great thing. And it's going to have to go down in terms of greatness for your career. But there are certain champions that, of course, have become completely undisputed that I would not call really all time great fighters, like Jamel Charlo and that of Josh Taylor. Jamel Charlo became undisputed in a weight class. Does that mean that he's as great as Bernard Hopkins? Josh Taylor ended up becoming undisputed in a weight class. Does that mean that he's over that of a Joe Calzaghe when you compare that of British and Scottish fighters? Of course not. At least in my personal view. So once again, of course, that has to be a bar. But the thing that, in my view, that always has to be the main ranking system, of course, is going to be accomplishments, but especially resume. When you talk about certain fighters like Floyd Mayweather Jr., when you talk about certain fighters like Manny Pacquiao, Canelo Alvarez, those are guys that have all-time great resumes and a dozen or more A-grade level names or serious level champions on their resume. Those are fighters that you're talking about. Crawford doesn't really have that type of resume. It is what it is. And also, to be quite honest, I wouldn't say that Usyk nor Inoue really does either, at least on that same level. So they, of course, all three of those fighters, in my view, can be said to be all-time greats and first ballot Hall of Famers. But we have to be careful in terms of ranking them, because undisputed was not as much of a goal back then as what it is today. Kind of like, once again, when you take a look at the UFC today, like Conor McGregor, for example. Conor McGregor is kind of the man that started the double champ thing. Once again, Conor McGregor wanted to become a 3-weight division champion in his career. That's what he wanted to do, or win as most belts as possible. Then when he became the double champ, more people started doing it. Then you've seen Daniel Cormier doing it. You've seen Henry Cejudo started doing it. John Jones, Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya tried to attempt it. Of course, he failed against Jan Blachowicz, but that's the point. You started seeing more double champs. Now, of course, was he the first one, overall that really tried to do that? No, of course not. But because there was Randy Couture and BJ Penn and, probably another guy that maybe I'm not thinking of, when it came down to it, But once again, we have to rank things carefully.
So Tank Davis is saying that's a super fight for him. A mega super fight cut in the same cloth of the mega super fight, the most lucrative, the biggest fight in boxing history, which is Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. That did 4.6 million pay-per-view buys. It grossed in over $500 million. And both fighters got over $100 million paid, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. 2 first ballot Hall of Fame iconic legends. Right? And so Gervonta Tank Davis is saying that this fight can be cut.
Both of those fighters, in my view, Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather Jr., they're both within my top 10 fighters of all time in terms of the greatest. When you talk about greatest fighters of all time, in my view, at least within that top 10 to top 20 range, you're talking about fighters like that of Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roy Jones Jr., Rocky Marciano, Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, perhaps, there might be some other ones that, potentially I'm missing. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., Roberto Duran, some other ones. And then, I don't know, after that, in terms of the top 20 ranking, I'd probably have certain guys, at least I could be in that conversation, probably Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, Canelo, who's a recent fighter, could potentially be in that same conversation, Terrence Bud Crawford, Alexander Usyk, Joe Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins, certain guys like that. And I'm sure that there's some other guys that I'm missing, that I would have to think about. And then, of course, when you talk about other fighters, like, and of course, Marvin Hagler, he'd probably be there as well, debatably. When you talk about other fighters, like Cotto and De La Hoya and Marquez and Mosley and Thomas Hearns, they're a level below those guys. They can't be within the top 20 conversation of all time because they lost too many big fights, but they still were A-grade level fighters and pound-for-pound greats.
In the same cloth as that fight. And this could be the fight to push him into that.
Marquez is in that category as well.
Conversation. Now, when you look at it from the standpoint, absolutely. Inoue is right now a first ballot Hall of Famer. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Gervonta Tank Davis is not.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for stating that. Now, do I believe necessarily that Gervonta Tank Davis is not a first ballot Hall of Famer? Well, perhaps he's not first ballot, but what I will state is this. I'd place Gervonta Tank Davis within the Hall of Fame because, in my view, if you're a legitimate two-weight division champion and if you've at least defeated some champions and A-grade level names in your career, then you deserve to be a Hall of Famer, in my personal view. Or at the very least, if you were able to become a two-weight division champion. Even Billy Joe Saunders and Andrade and Paulie Malignaggi, I would probably put within my Hall of Fame. Perhaps not first ballot, but they would be Hall of Fame. When it comes down to it. So I would put Gervonta Tank Davis in my Hall of Fame. But basically, what is Blue Blood Sports TV stating right there? That Inoue is a person that has accomplished more in his career. And right now, at least he would have that one fight overall to where it was looked at as 50-50. Gervonta Tank Davis has never really been truly in a 50-50 level fight.
But he is on the verge of. He's 29 years of age. He's a 3-division world champion. Now, some people may say Gervonta Tank Davis is a 1-division world champion because he never held an official title at 135 and at 140, right? But now he holds the WBA super title. He held the WBA and...
But anyways, that's pretty much about it. I didn't really want to go too long on this because I don't want to make the video too long. But keep in mind that this is not a video to tear down Gervonta Tank Davis. I think that eventually, especially if he beats the names that he's going to have the ability to beat, that he's going to become an all-time great fighter. I think that for the next several years, if of course he's able to stay at a peak level of talent and a peak level of ability, he could potentially become the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So Gervonta Tank Davis is definitely an extreme talent. He's probably the new face of boxing, at least when you talk about once Canelo is officially knocked off that mountaintop. Gervonta Tank Davis is a phenomenal talent, a phenomenal fighter, a great fighter. Would I call him an all-time great fighter? I'm going to call him an all-time great fighter because, in my view, to be an all-time great fighter, you have to have a great resume or be consistent within that top 5 or at least top 10 pound-for-pound, or, be someone that has beaten a multitude of decent champions or proven something throughout your career. I think that Gervonta Tank Davis is on his way, but I don't think he's quite there yet. But the reason why I wanted to talk about that once again is because, no, Gervonta Tank Davis right now is not a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. He is not. He is a great fighter. He is a great talent. Is he logically or objectively, if we rank a list right now, is he top 5 pound-for-pound? No, he is not. All right? No, he is not. And that also goes for his comparison to Crawford, his comparison to Usyk, his comparison to Canelo, his comparison to Inoue, and right now also probably that of Beterbiev. All right, now when you talk about Canelo, Inoue, Usyk, and Crawford, all those guys, in my view, they already have their place in history. But when you talk about Beterbiev, of course, he'll have to go a little bit longer because we need to see him against Bivol and maybe some other guys, maybe David Benavidez and some other guys. But Gervonta Tank Davis right now, yes, he needs his place still a little bit in history. All those other guys, other than Beterbiev that I mentioned, they already have a place in history. And at the current moment in time, when you talk about their resumes or a 50-50 level fight that they were in that was looked at as their generational fight, all those fighters have been in one. Canelo Alvarez was against Gennady Golovkin and some other fighters that could be looked at as that such, but especially Gennady Golovkin, and some other ones as well. Alexander Usyk, of course, was against AJ Anthony Joshua, but especially this recent fight, Tyson Fury. Both of those fights, I think he was favored to lose, and he won both of those fights. Of course, there were some fights in the cruiserweight division that were good as well, but those are the two biggest ones. Crawford fought that of Errol Spence Jr. Inoue, of course, fought that of Fulton. And Canelo Alvarez, of course, once again, he had Golovkin. So, Gervonta Tank Davis, once again, great fighter, but he hasn't had that fight as of yet. We're going to see who mainly is going to be that potential big threat, or he's at the very least going to have to accumulate a certain amount of A-grade level names, Lopez, Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, Regis Prograis, some of the other guys, blah, blah, blah. So we'll have to see what ends up happening. Liam Paro, some of these other guys. So let's see what happens. But right now, I just wanted to make that video because, of course, a certain amount of people are asking the question, is Gervonta Tank Davis, is he being disrespected, blah, 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 because he's a black fighter. Well, black fighters, of course, get disrespected. But no, the criticism, once again, is a little bit fair because Gervonta Tank Davis is being ranked a little bit too quickly within that top 5 pound-for-pound for his resume. But in terms of a talent, Do I believe that he's top 5 pound for pound? Absolutely. I think that Gervonta Tank Davis is there in terms of talent with almost anybody in the world. But in terms of accomplishments and resume, no, he's not quite there yet. So I thought that I would talk about that. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.